I had some adventures recently that I'm going to tell you about in this lecture. And if any of you faint or anything like that, why, fall straight back in the chair, not into the aisle. And so forth. And if you start screaming or anything, why, I think the pavilion speakers are on, aren't they? Go out there and scream. Anyway, the difficulties of exploration are based on the fact that you can most easily go when you know. And I think the British motorist deserves the gold medal amongst all gold medals for knowing before they go. I remember one time getting a routing from the Royal Automobiles Club for an African trip, and they gave me little cards, and everything was measured off in tenths of a mile. And I read these cards all over. You went over the top of a brow of a hill, you see, and there was a small cairn of stones to the right, and that was 1.7 miles from the point you had just left, you see. And then down at the bottom there was a small bridge, and it had a barn on the right, you see, and that was 1.85 miles, you see, and going along. And I read all these cards and didn't bother to take the trip because it was... But exploration has its disadvantages, definitely has its disadvantages, because more than once one finds himself out at the end of a ridge and there's no way back. He can't get up the sheer surfaces he's come down, and he looks in front of him, he finds there's no way down. And that is it. And so it can be too much of a good thing not knowing before you go. You actually can't know too much about where you're going before you go when you're doing anything like exploration of the time track. And I've been fronting up on this for some little while, and I find very few times have I had any faint heart or upset along that until just recently. And I got the creeps, frankly. Well, it starts like this. I was up in the Van Allen belt. This is factual. And I don't know why they're scared of the Van Allen belt, because it's simply hot. You'd be surprised how warm space is. Down amongst the clouds and so forth, it can get pretty cold and damp. But you get well up and sunlight shining around, that sort of thing. It's quite hot. And the Van Allen belt was radioactively hot. A lot of photons get trapped in that area and so forth. And I was up there watching the sunrise. Well, that was very interesting, and my perception was very good, and I was taking a look at Norway and Essex and the places around, you know, and getting myself sort of oriented. And then something happened to me that I didn't know quite what had happened to me. I thought some facsimiles must have appeared in front of me, but they didn't look like facsimiles. And some other things happened, and I had a feeling like I might possibly go into the sun, and a few other little uncomfortablenesses there were... that wasn't what awed me. But I got confused. Because the sun was suddenly larger, and then it was smaller. And somehow or another, I was doing a change of space process that I myself was not familiar with. And it made me sort of bite off my Thetan fingernails just a little bit, you know. And I said, well, I better look this over a little more thoroughly. And proceeded to do so. And a bit later that day, I did some reach and withdraw on the polar cap and so on, orientation. And we got quite a bit out of this because I was able to establish some reach and withdraw process. I knew how the world must look to somebody who was in a body and had pictures appearing in front of them and that sort of thing. I knew they could get kind of queasy about this situation. Well, that wasn't what overawed me. what overawed me was when I found out I hadn't been looking at pictures. That was upsetting. Because I was invalidating my own perception. It didn't look like pictures, don't you see? I was busy invalidating my own perception, and so on, and I wondered why I was nervous. That was what was really puzzling me. What was this all about? And I couldn't quite figure out what had happened, and then I finally did find out what had happened. And I had actually appeared in a dispatcher's tower on Venus, and had appeared back where I was above here, and had done it like that, with no volition on my own part at all. That was upsetting. You start doing appear and disappear, you see, automatically. And you say, what's happening? What's happening? You mean to say I'm going to be prowling around in the stratosphere and all of a sudden find myself appearing and disappearing elsewhere without any volition on my own part? Actually, I didn't think all this through until later. But I thought, well, prowling around up here is a little bit over my head just now. And I better know a little bit more before I go. So that was some weeks ago. And since that time, I've been exploring around and finally found out what I was looking at. And you talk about a fellow, he's brought home this nice pet, tame variety of snake, you see. And he's put it in a box, and then a snakeologist comes along, and he says, good heavens, man, where did you find that king cobra? That's the way I felt. I've been looking at where you go every time you die. And I finally found out what this planet is and why life is so loopy. Now, we've got some of this back in 52. Dishing it out intellectually. I had a good intellectual reality on. We talk about between lives area, and we dished all this off the cuff. This is not data which is unknown to us, don't you see? But that isn't the same as going there. That isn't the same as going there with your eyes wide open and realizing that all you had to do was to be there at the exact point that you're supposed to appear at, and willy-nilly you would have gone over Niagara Falls through the implant, you see. And that is what has happened to me the last few weeks. And so I've been studying this situation very hard, and as I say, I've come up with the data with regard to it. Of all the nasty, mean, and vicious implants that have ever been invented, this one is it. And has been going on for thousands of years. It's the most complete memory wipeout system and the biggest bunch of lies that anybody ever had anything to do with. Now, your understanding is that when you die, why, somehow or another, about 15 minutes later, you appear in another body. Just look at this thing from a time disorientation basis. That is a lie. It takes 69 days plus. More than 69 days. And you very often go, see, this has upset some of our calculations. We wondered what has happened to some of our people, why they didn't show up again immediately, that sort of thing. You've gone as long as 8 or 9 years between death and birth. Now, what happens, I'll just give you a fast rundown on this situation. What happens is you've got a compulsion to appear. This is why this yo-yo, see. You got a compulsion to appear at the between lives return point. And, of course, you just do a disappear at death and appear there. You don't travel to there. It's all nicely implanted, and you're supposed to arrive at this exact point. And having arrived at this point, you go through the works. And the works consist of a false death given to you in pictures. You're caught there and beamed in, and you get a bunch of pictures which they have taken. These aren't your pictures, and it tells you all about the death you just died. Only that's not the death you just died. They give you a completely false death. Now, this gives us a moment of pause right at this point. This is alleged, by the way, to be a 15-day time track. It isn't. It isn't. It's days, but it isn't 15 days. And it says it's 15-day time track. See, and this is 15 days from where you last were. It starts with a repetitive picture which gets you good and lost. In other words, they keep giving you the same picture and the same picture and the same picture, so that when you try to back out of the incident, you keep running into the same picture, and you keep thinking that you've got the beginning of the incident. You haven't. You've got a picture in the incident, see? And then you go to an earlier picture, and you think you've got the picture now that starts the incident, and that's wrong, too. So the trick is to get ahead of it. But that can be varied one way or the other, and I needn't go on about this, but usually you see an actual scene, and then you see a picture of the scene. So then you can't really get outside the pictures in order to begin the incident, see? So you can't find basic on the incident. That's all that amounts to. All right, well, this whole series of pictures represented as happening in a space of 15 days, counted off day after day, gives you your death, which is a false death, and it's not the right death at all. Matter of fact, in scouting this in session, I found a death whereby I got me head blown off about 11:50. And they showed me a picture of a death by exploding bombards. It's very interesting because they didn't have bombards in 1150. Get the idea? They didn't have them for another couple of hundred years. See? They weren't common. So they slip. But these pictures they show of your death are all Earth pictures. I don't know how we explain this. It could be explained by them coming down and taking some pictures. I'd hate to explain it so esoterically as they pick up somebody's photograph and photograph his facsimiles, because in this particular character it wasn't possible. Either that or they in some fashion preordain the destination of the society at that point and expect your pictures will be concerned with that, don't you see? But they are Earth pictures, and they compare to the historical periods of Earth. For instance, death at 750, you get knocked off your horse or something of the sort, or die in bed with your boots off, and you go up there and find yourself having died in a battle amongst knights, and have a helmet sitting on a cross as your grave, so forth. It's not your grave, but it's a Norman helmet. Interesting, see? Messed up like fire drill. In other words, they give you the wrong death. That's the way it begins. Now you move up to a point called the year zero, and thank God they've got a year zero, because you can always date the incident by dating the year zero, because there is no year zero on your time track. So when you want to take one of these incidents apart for dating, always look for a hole. Look for a hole in the incidents, you see, and you'll find something like, well, there's a year zero there. Well, good. Date the year zero. For God's sakes, don't date the incident. I'll show you why in just a moment. Because they give you a future history of your life. This is going to be your life. Television program, This Is Your Life, has no bearing on the thing at all. But I often wondered why I could never bear the stinking program. But this will be your life. And they now give you, from the year zero, which they communicate to you as the year zero, this is given in another room. This is given in a room alongside another chamber, See, your first 15-day period, that all finishes up, see. Alleged 15 days, see. Then you go to the year 0, and this is a great big room, and this screen is a whitish colored screen surround, a whitish surround to a copper grid. This copper grid is many feet long. I wouldn't have a tape measured it. I didn't have a tape measure. I'm not really up there very high yet. I can't carry things around. Anyway, it's, I don't know, at a guess, 75 feet, 125 feet, 150 feet, something like that. Copper grid. And it's very long and high. But it's much narrower than it is long, don't you see? Be on the order of about 3 feet high and 75 feet long, or 5 feet high and 150 feet long, something of that sort, you see. And this has some compulsive effect upon the Thetan. And the whole thing is to make him make pictures. And they don't show you your future life at all. They show you what happened to you at the year 0 at the time you entered the universe. Now, it so happens that there are a lot of incidents where people have told you entered the universe, and some happened not so long ago, and some happened a long time ago. And there's can be such a thing as a guard room or something like that, and there's a bunch of angels sitting around in the guard room, and you walk in a doll body at the beginning of the universe. You walk in a doll body. Slight discrepancy there. You're madly out of valence. You see, that's you over there. But it's a facsimile of some kind or another, and the year 0 usually takes one of these facsimiles. Now, there isn't really a picture in the whole sequence of the next section of this. There aren't any pictures, you understand, except yours. So what actually happens is from the year 0 to the year 1 trillion, 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 trillion years in the future, you're given a compulsion to mock up your own trap on this screen. And date by date by date by date by date, from the year 0 forward to 1 trillion, 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 trillion years, you're given a compulsion to put your time track up there. Now, all that's very interesting. You finally come to the second significant date, which is 1 trillion, 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 trillion years in the future. This is the wrong date cake, if there ever was any. But you actually have put your own facsimiles from your own year 0 forward to that far from what you considered the year 0. Of course, this makes a scramble, too, but they're just your own pictures. Remember, there wasn't a single picture in that whole thing except what you put there. But what did you put up there? Man, you put up the early implants, you put up the glade, the bear, the gorilla, the helitrobus implants, you put up the whole lousy lot, entrapments and everything else, and you just did that, and this was probably in the course of the next 60 days, not 15 minutes, 60 days. Long time, isn't it? 60 days of re-stimulation and wrong dates. Those are all your pictures. You scan somebody through that sequence, and what are you scanning him through? You're scanning him through the misdated helitrobus implants. You're scanning him through anything and everything that you can think of, all misdated. So you'd say, all right, you can't scan through these things, so it's impossible to get through it. And this was about the time I started to feel queasy and felt that I was just being run just a little bit over my head. I was scanned through it twice, and I felt that was a little bit over my head. Because to take it a gulp, a scan through all of the goals of the helitrobus implant in one single pass, it made me feel just a little bit odd. And I felt this is a little bit too steep for me. I better find some way to take this thing apart so it can be taken apart. All right, so there's this middle period. That's in the main room, the middle period. And how a Thetanus moves through there, I don't know yet. I think he must be moved through there on a very slow, endless belt proposition. Very slowly. Fantastic slow speed. He spends 60 days going past this cotton-picking screen. See? It's not that big, putting these pictures on it. Now we get to the third sequence. And this is far more interesting because they furnish all the pictures, which I think is very sweet of them. They don't now try to pick up any pictures. They throw you usually, nearly always, the same sequence. This is a very, very stable sequence. It's a bunch of pictures, and they have they use a wavelength communication system. By the way, thought concept wavelength communication system is all I can make out of it. Not words. But you do hear some sound, and part of it is a baby crying. And they show you picking up a body and so forth. And then they show you departing, and of course you depart, and then you get another picture of departing, and you get another picture of departing, so you really never get out of that one either, see? And then they show you a picture of being sent directly down to earth and channeled straight into the body of a newborn baby. I think it's awfully nice. And you even hear the baby cry. I think that's good. That's good. It's very clever. And part of this, and all through this thing, you've got a false emotion of we're just good Joes, and we're doing our best for you. And you get the feeling, well, I can imagine there's one thought concept in there which is terribly interesting, which I imagine you girls have occasionally been startled at, which is, we've treated you like a gentleman. Remember, we've treated you like a gentleman. Anyway, you want to know why the girls are always wearing men's sweaters. So. But the whole idea and the whole emotional tone that's shot at you all during the rest of this, duress, knockabout, re-stimulation, misdating, scramble up, washout, is we're being nice. Okay? As a matter of fact, you'll find that I bet you'll occasionally get a PC who will say, well, they treated me well. I couldn't get along without this. You know, that sort of thing. Because that's the prevailing emotion. There's no anger, there's nothing. The light touch, see? Most effective possible touch. Anyway, you then see a picture of yourself separating from this planet. And how they explain that, I don't know, but it's sort of, it's just thrown in for good measure because it said so on the blueprint, I suppose. You've already been sent to Earth, you see, and the thing is kind of mixed up. And you even get a picture of yourself being scooted across a desert on Earth with yucca trees down under you and that sort of thing. And there you are. You're on your way, and you're going down to pick up this baby, and everything is fine. See, you couldn't pick up a kid without him, you know. You couldn't do that. So magic, you see. They have all these babies beamed, you know. And all they do is ride you down the beam, and you pick up the baby, and you're all set. And there you are, and so forth. And this thing then with the multiple ends so that you can't find the end of it easily. You know, the end, and then the end, and then the end, and then the end, which is the end, and so forth, finally winds up with what actually happens to you. You're simply capsuled and dumped in the Gulf of Lower California. Splash. To hell with you. You're on your own, man. If you can get out of that and through that and wander around through the cities and find some girl who looks like she's going to get married or have a baby or something like that, you're all set. And if you can find a maternity ward to a hospital or something, you're okay. And you just eventually just pick up a baby. You're strictly on your own, man, in a state of total amnesia and gaw, having been lied to this degree with your track-all scandals. Well, in this sequence, you're given a compulsion that the next time you die, you must appear on the landing stage. And that's it. That's the whole ruddy, lousy, cotton-picking lot. This is an interesting thing because this is the most vicious engram I have ever seen set up. To scan through that thing is asking you to scan through a restimulation of a trillion years of your own time track. Just asking you to do it just like that, see? Well, that's all right, just scan through it, you know. Can't do it, man. And to find the beginning of it, well, there are other ones with false beginnings and false endings so that you can't get out of them easily, but the time lie. This is specifically 15 days. This is your last 15 days, you see, on Earth, you know. Only it isn't. And it's not even 15 days. And then the last section tells you that it's 100 days long. You get 100 days counted off to you in there. But it isn't 100 days. It's more like about 9 days. And then having channeled you squarely into the head of your new body, they dump you in the Gulf of Lower California. Very interesting, because by the time you get out of that, this is a type of facsimile that can't be run. Nobody has ever been able to approach even looking at it. So it gives you enough queasiness so that you just tend to back right straight off from the thing. How the devil can you undo that? Now, because you've been given such a compulsion to appear there, here I am up in the Van Allen belt, and I take a look around, and I see the sun, and I get myself oriented, and I'm just spotting myself around, you know, getting ready to flex a bicep or something like this, and I just glance in the direction of Venus, and I go, I'm on the landing stage. See, the compulsions shift me in space. I didn't stay on the landing stage. Instead, I went up around the airport, took a look around the airport. I found, oddly enough, that I'd gotten curious about this place before, some hundreds of years ago, and had simply hung around for a while and hadn't gone through the implant. But this has been going on for as long as you've been on this planet. There's lots of these. They run somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 per century. If you've been on this planet 10,000 years, you've got what? Quite a few of them. Figure it out for yourself. That's how many of these confounded things you got. As far as I know, it hasn't changed an iota. I'm saying a little bit more than I know now. But I think it apparently was simply set up and has continued on. There's been no vast change of pattern, as far as I know. But I'm prepared to amend that when I start looking at a few early facsimiles on it, which I haven't yet. The point is this. The Helitrobus implants, the gorilla implants, the bear implants, way back, Thetan fights, all of this kind of thing. You got through all that. You got through all that, and you were still OT. They used to say about me that I'd never been the same after the second Helitrobus. You know, I used to occasionally snarl at people more than I used to earlier. But before I hit this place, I was on the same post for 80 trillion years. Same post, same name. Give you some idea of stability of identity. Mary Sue gave the cue on this thing. She said, look at how hard they have to work to keep you from being OT. Hey, now, that's quite a thought. Isn't that quite a thought? Now, you look at this. You look at this now. The complete idiocy of it. Somebody sits up on Venus. There are probably some other stations around up in the system. This one's on Venus. I notice that we all believe that Venus has a methane atmosphere and is unlivable. I almost got run down by a freight locomotive the other day. Didn't look very uncivilized to me. I'm allergic to freight locomotives. They always running into you. We notice that Mars doesn't have any atmosphere either and won't support life. In spite of the fact that it turns green and red and purple with the seasons, it doesn't support life. We understand there's lots of things we understand about this system. Isn't it? But this is a carefully maintained station, and a space opera meat body type society maintains it very carefully. They have a hospital. There's spacecraft hang around there, dispatcher stations, landing platforms, this type of thing. It's all highly civilized, but they carefully maintain this one. It's very interesting. They maintain this one. They've maintained it for thousands of years without any change. What's fascinating? Why are they maintaining this thing? Why? Why is it so important to them? Don't be deluded by the atmosphere they pump into you, the emotion they pump into you during the implant, that it's all for the best in this best of all possible worlds, man. It might be that we've treated you like a gentleman, but the fact of the case is I classify that as a dirty trick. Why is it so interesting whether or not somebody gets off this planet? Well, frankly, your answer is practically as good as mine. I can make a few guesses on this, but that's about all. But the rest of this universe isn't run this way. It's a question of where are we? Why? Well, I know this, that onto this planet there's a great deal of dumping has gone on. Stuff from the nearby galaxy, not this galaxy, but the next galaxy over, and so forth, gone on here. I know they take political prisoners and guys who they don't want around, but it's less personal than they think. They just have excess population, so they start to get rid of their excess population, you see. They've got a revolt, or you're on the wrong side of a war or something like that, and they pick you up in droves and ice cube you and throw you into a sea someplace. I know this planet has been subjected to that, and several planets in this immediate end of this galaxy have been subjected to that. That I know. But somebody must have taken a great deal of interest in this fact, and somebody must be awfully afraid. Somebody must be awfully afraid. You could almost say it isn't so many how many are here, but it might also be a question of who's here. Think of the cost. Now let's think of it in terms of just a society, you see. Think of the cost of maintaining a huge station, or several stations. Its maintenance, light, power, wages. Think of maintaining it on a basis of hard work, because it is. Look at the volume that station handles. How many people die on this planet in any given day? Well, that's how many guys are started in on the beginning of that line in any day. That's a lot of people, man. That's something on the order of 2.5 billion implants every half century. That's quite a volume. Of course, somebody may not say that's a great volume, but look at the length of the implant. If it were a 2-second implant, I would say, well, yeah, anybody can handle that. But I know that it's more than 69 days. And I know the stuff is ferried back here. Well, I think that's all very interesting, and this looks to me like a very expensive proposition. And remember, this has been going on since before the days of Egypt. Way back, without any change. What industry? What enthusiasm? So we ask these various questions. Who's here and who are we? See, we can ask a lot of questions out of this. I don't pretend to have the answers to these questions. There's no interpretation I'm giving it particularly beyond the interpretation, the same interpretation I'm telling you about the room you live in. I've seen the room. And you're just beginning to look at it. Now, the amount of duress necessary to produce a continuous degraded state can be measured thereby. Look at the hard work to keep people aberrated. Now, a few months ago I was telling you about if you just left alone for a while, you'd snap out of it. Remember? If you just left alone for a while, you'd snap out of it. The universe itself is therapeutic. But look at how hard they have to look at it. I know that in any given situation, somebody has to be awfully active to maintain the situation in a bad state. Situations have to be maintained in a bad state. They just don't naturally exist in a bad state. And that's very definitely true of people. If you were left alone, even if you could put in 200 or 300 years at it, you'd start to snap out of your hop. See, you have to pick up the next baby anyhow, all off your own bat. Well, supposing you just picked up the next baby without the between lives implant to slow you down. Well, I find that would be quite interesting. Quite an interesting thought. Because right there you're looking at world clearing. And we got several ways that we can whip this situation. We're actually talking about an existing situation. We're talking about the situation that your PC is sitting in that PC chair in an auditing session. There is his PTP. How the hell is he going to get out of here? Well, I know how to get out of here. I could have went, as a matter of fact. I just don't appear in this immediate vicinity of the solar system. Go back and find your friends and bring some battle cruisers in. But the point I'm making here is the key is the second you find yourself free to appear, don't you see? Well, I appeared, I said to hell with that, and stepped back up above here again and said, now what the hell's happened here? What's this funny compulsion? And ran that on down, that's it. Well, actually, it doesn't take much to get rid of the compulsion. Now, in exteriorization, it's very easy for a Thetan to exteriorize if you have him be in some place he's familiar with. Now, supposing Scientologists just elected a place to be when they kicked the bucket. And supposing, we simply ran out, and actually it's just a section of this implant, and even though it jams the case up, who cares? Run out that compulsion, even by repeater technique, don't you see? We can do that, see? Run that compulsion to appear over there, see? And then tell the guy very strong and hard, well, now, where is a good place that you're very familiar with? Well, when you die, appear there. Now, remember that. When you die, appear such and such a place. Different place. 200 or 300 years, even with no processing, you'd be free. In other words, you'd live it out. Look at the amount of time that's just been bought. Because frankly, it wouldn't take more than a couple of hours to do this job on anybody. If you simply told a Thetan to be in a place where he was familiar with or liked to be, he would exteriorize. You can ask somebody what he's familiar with. He gets tangled up sometimes, thinks he's gone into a facsimile when he's actually gone into a locale, don't you see? As far as that's concerned, you see, you could use St. Hill, providing you ran out all your ARC brakes on the subject. But the point here is elementary. If a guy has got to pick up his own body off his own bat anyway, well, he might as well just pick up a body off his own bat anyway. Nobody else is going to do anything for him. In fact, if you're going to give him, you know very well that what would happen to somebody if he had an engram and you gave him another engram on top of it and said his engram didn't exist, you know how therapeutic that would be. And then you misdated everything he's got, and then told him a bunch of lies, and then pulled an emotional switch on him. You can imagine the state your PC would be in if you did these things. So supposing you just deleted that out of the subject of death, and somebody just was in a place they were familiar with and didn't go back through the between lives area. Well, I'm telling you true that in 200 or 300 years you would have lived it out. You'd be flexing your biceps anyhow, relieved from that situation. You'd be starting to take a long breath. Because there must be considerable fear connected with this. Perhaps the fear of death is mainly the fear of the between lives area. May not be a fear of death at all. Certainly, oblivion takes place during that period. Now, economic chaos would ensue at once if people kept coming back and demanding their toys back. I'm sure that you'd get a lot of people who would argue against this and say this was not the best for this best of all possible worlds. They'd say, well, I could say a lot of things about this. I'm frankly not very interested in what they would say about this. But now, as Scientologists, supposing we just started tabbing people on the shoulder and giving them this 2-hour treatment, which deleted the compulsion to return to the between lives area, instead of that, appeared in Yankee Stadium or something and took off and went and found a new body. You see, the only service performed, it gives you a place to be when you're dying. See, and spares you some of the agony of death. So it gives you a place to be. That's the only service performed. All the rest of them cut your throat. See? Well, you can easily perform that service. Next thing you know, you start cutting down their customers. Now, a couple of things stand in the road of all this. You should know this. A couple of questions are unanswered here. How close is the liaison between these jerks, these nuts, these fellows, and Earth? How close a liaison do they maintain? Do they care anything about Earth at all? They must have seen a space probe going by the other day. They must be aware of some interplanetary action taking place right here. What are they going to say about it? When in the last 2 weeks I've seen a full armored spaceship sitting on a landing port with mine own eyes. What are they going to do? I don't think they'll do anything. I think they're hung with their own petard. The moment they appear, they blow the show. I don't think they do anything. I just think they get fixed on a wrongness. And they're continuously executing this wrongness. They continuously, so they insist on its rightness. And they think that's going to solve everything. I'm interested that jamming the track to this degree and giving so little time period amongst incidents, as they do to the person, is giving people a weird time, zzz, so that you have fan job airplanes only occupying a third of a century. Whereas, as a matter of fact, in most societies, they'll be happy and content with a fan job airplane for anything up to 1 billion years. Somebody invented a fan job airplane. Fine. That's good. Over here, we got jet planes. Now we got supersonic planes. Now we got spaceships. You see? Pocket, 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 pocket. It's this acceleration. I've been interested in that because I've seen it as quite different here than it is in any other place I've ever been. And this could be the primary factor. They give you your time track, such a fast jam together. Everybody gets an idea of more accelerated motion of the way progress has got to occur. There could be other explanations. There could be an explanation that the base is being created here for takeover of this particular galaxy, since this type of implant is not native to this galaxy. Inspecting your own track, you will see that is the case. It's the next galaxy. These could be an enemy to this galaxy, sitting there quietly, letting a manufacturing or production base build up for an attack into this galaxy. These could be simply prison guards. And with tacit consent from one and all, far and wide, why, any of you agitators that cut up a fuss or didn't join the local AMA or something like this, they capsulized you and threw you down here, and they know very well that this is a prison. Now, I know that this is known in some peculiar way because bulletin board notices exist all over the place with regard to this planet. They say, no landings on Earth. Why does everybody comply with this? I got here by accidentally landing here up in the Himalayas. But why does everybody comply with this? Why is this planet stayed away from? I don't know. How many visitors did Alcatraz have? This is about where we sit with regard to this situation. Now, there's another factor here that's quite interesting. If they have pictures of Earth in order to show you how you died, did they get them on Earth, or are they picking them up in some weird mind-reading fact off of beings as they come up there? Had they actually figured out how to photograph a facsimile? If they figured that kind of thing out, why, then that's explained. But how do they know what's going on here? That is not finally answered, don't you see? Now, they haven't done anything about these space probes. The boys have been at it here, shooting stuff off into the heavens for the last several years, and nothing has been done about this. Now, knowing very well, I suppose, that any time they exceeded a certain zone or area, they know very well that an armored cruiser could blow anything that this planet could build like a kid's toys out of the sky, so maybe they're not worried about it. Or maybe they're counting on a decimation of population, a destruction of industry, and atomic war. Another question is, how thoroughly do these people influence the affairs of Earth? We can understand that Earth is a very, very strange planet. I've never seen populations behave with the same hecticness and weirdness. And of course, if people who were rather revolutionary or upset or nonconformist were picked up uniformly and concentrated on one planet, you'd get almost an ungovernable situation, which I think rather tends to explain maybe what this is all about. I've seen other planets go nutty, but only when they were in external stress of great magnitude. Otherwise, they were rather peaceful. The days before the Heliotropous implants on some of the planets attacked by those people, you couldn't maintain a government. It was everything going to pieces all the time. But that's an interesting question. All right? What degree of influence is exerted against this planet, then? Now, astrologists may have something. The astrologists may have something in their favor when you realize that these planets swinging closer to Earth would be easier to travel, make it easier to travel to Earth, and further from Earth you'd have less traffic or less this or that, and so you'd have less things happening on Earth, don't you see? The proximity of planets, combinations of planets or that sort of thing, maybe just to the degree of the interspatial relationships of the thing and so on. Maybe this has some influence on the situation. I wouldn't know. Just discussing here points. Now, here's another point. Where do we sit? I think between thee and me, that's the point we're interested in. Yeah, well, they're maybe counting on an atomic war wiping out space opera and so forth. Space probes already may have excited their curiosity. There may be some purpose in this, but that they took no action when the first space probes passed them either says they're back of space probing or says some other explanation exists for that. So we can neglect all that. What is the role which we occupy in this? This is very, very, very interesting. Now, that I release this might be a source of great worry to you. But remember, it's been in a book, one of the books carefully seized by the fools and druggists, the fools and drug addicts. That's a new name. That's a good name, isn't it? The fools and drug addicts. Anyway, was what to audit, and Between Lives area are described in the book What to Audit. This is not unknown. What to Audit is many, many years old. It's been kicking around for a long time. It's been available to almost anybody, and look, nothing's happened. In other words, the information has already been released when the publicity on the subject of Dianetics was at a much higher pitch than it is on the subject of Scientology. So what is this? If we really started to run with the ball and so forth, we expect a couple of meat bodies and the usual white jumper that comes along with the space opera, except those guys, by the way, wear khaki. It's an odd-looking uniform. We expect them to appear on the front doorsteps and say, "Are you a Scientologist?" Well, there's the spaceship, and they take you up and throw you in the can at Pluto or something. Is this the kind of action here that we might expect? Or is it a situation where we are no threat to them? It'll all sort of pass away. Or are they in a state where this covert action, going forward for so many years, would tolerate almost anything before they would disclose themselves? Or do they count absolutely on the exact camouflage which we have? We are ridiculed. That's our camouflage. I should think if anybody was in the know or any liaison line existed between these two systems, maybe Kennedy and other presidents find this out the moment they step in the White House. You know, maybe that's what makes them look so old in 2 or 3 years, the way they cave in. Maybe they find out, well, you boys are slaves, you see. And no, I don't think anything like that happens. But supposing you did get a liaison line between this society and them, what would be their best reports on us? Oh, fraudulent bunch of quacks, space opera, science fictioneers, bums. The very best authorities, the AMA, the fools and drug addicts, the newspapers, which is where they get their news, radio broadcasts, television broadcasts, all forms of news represent us as being totally unimportant, ridiculous, and so forth. I think they could have all of our books sitting on a desk up there right this minute and laugh themselves silly without a bit of worry about the whole thing. They'd certainly not blow the show for it. And they'd have to blow the show, you understand? They'd have to appear. Not covertly. You don't bring spaceships down in a dew-line monitored society privately. Must be getting very hard for these characters to deliver the goods these days. They're past the radar screens and that sort of thing. I think they could be sitting there with the whole library in front of them, and they wouldn't have any impulse to do anything. They say, well, a few of them and so on, and it's unimportant, and so forth. And you wouldn't really want to do that, and after all, we never have done anything like this, and besides, the atomic war is coming right up. And There's no danger from these people because they're a bunch of frauds anyway. There's always some madman, gets some kind of an idea like this, and it all passes away and so forth. Look at the Buddhist. We let him conquer 3/4 of Asia. He was trying to end this life-death cycle and keep from coming through our carefully maintained plant, and he never made it. Never did anything. So there's your precedent. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. No, nothing happened, but I was standing on their landing stage the other day. Nothing happened. The funny part of it is a lot of us have friends. That's interesting, too. And if you have to work this hard to keep somebody aberrated, and working this hard, you still aren't successful in preventing a breakthrough the way we have made in this society. In spite of all of the cockeyed, contrary propaganda, lies, and nonsense which are leveled at this society, we are making progress. And if this continues, we will make progress all the way. We're a polite gathering, and it is no time to indulge in threats or violence or anything like that. So I won't describe any future plans with relationship to these people. But I think the one thing they must be afraid of is having their planet rolled. Which, of course, the one thing that will happen to them. They've been looking down the backs of our necks that we didn't know it for thousands of years, each one of us as a person and as a society as a whole. And I just want to point out to you that the other day I was looking down the back of theirs. Thank you very much.